I'm like, I'm sure only in a good way, only in positive.
What else would it be?
Log, good job.
What do you think of it?
It's good. Nice. Very good.
You're not that lucky. It's not gonna let you.
Tired for some reason.
Oh. Don't go there enough.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Wendy, if you'd call the roll, please.
Paul Banks,
Here.
Pam Howard,
Here.
Lori Vista Ward,
Here.
Barbara Cruz,
Here.
Dave Levy,
Here.
Mark Sutter,
Here.
Jeff Swanty.
Here.
And Jeff, if you'd like to lead us in the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Pam, if you would read the mission statement, please.
The Thompson School District will be a school district that empowers, challenges, and inspires students, faculty, staff, parents, school leaders, and community members to learn, achieve, and excel.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion for adoption of the agenda as printed.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the adoption as printed. Is there any discussion? No. Hearing none. Wendy, if you'd call the roll, please.
Paul Banks,
Aye.
Pam Howard,
Aye.
Lori Vista Ward,
Aye.
Barbara Cruz,
Aye.
Dave Levy,
Aye.
Mark Sutter,
Aye.
Jeff Swanty.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. First item up is item 3.1, approval of minutes from executive session February 7th and regular meeting on February 7th. Oh, well, you know what? There's three of them, so let's do them all separate then, please. So the first one up is executive session minutes from February 7th, 2018, and I will entertain a motion to approve those.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as presented for executive session on Wednesday, February 7th. Are there any corrections to those minutes? Discussion? Wendy, if you'd call the roll, please.
Paul Banks,
Aye.
Pam Howard,
Aye.
Lori Vista Ward,
Aye.
Barbara Cruz,
Aye.
Dave Levy,
Aye.
Mark Sutter,
Aye.
Jeff Swanty.
Aye.
Okay, those are unanimously approved. We will next move to the minutes for the regular meeting Wednesday, February 7th, and I'll entertain a motion for those.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as presented for February 7th regular meeting. Is there any discussion or are there any corrections to the minutes? Wendy, if you'd call the roll, please.
Paul Banks,
Aye.
Pam Howard,
Aye.
Lori Vista Ward,
Aye.
Barbara Cruz,
Aye.
Dave Levy,
Aye.
Mark Sutter,
Aye.
Jeff Swanty.
Aye.
Thank you, and those are unanimously approved. And finally, the last set is for executive session, minutes for executive session on Wednesday, February 14th, and I will entertain a motion to approve those.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes for executive session on Wednesday, February 14th. Corrections or discussion? Wendy, if you'd call the roll, please.
Paul Banks,
Aye.
Pam Howard,
Aye.
Lori Vista Ward,
Aye.
Barbara Cruz,
Aye.
Dave Levy,
Aye.
Mark Sutter,
Aye.
Jeff Swanty.
Aye.
Thank you, and those are unanimously approved as well. Public participation portion of the meeting. Dr. Scheer, do you have Inspiring Students Awards tonight?
board members, it's always a privilege for me to stand before you and celebrate the positive things that are going on in Thompson. And we have a lot of that at this time, and there are some special people that we wanted to recognize. First of all, nominated by Tom Kerrigan is Theresa Morgan. Theresa, are you here tonight? Well, come on over here, girl. Our busy lives, we fail to recognize those who perform beyond the call. I want to share with you what a pleasure it is to work with Theresa Morgan in elementary education. I realize her first responsibility is to support Anne Marie and Sarah, and many people at TSD do more than their fair share, but Theresa, without fail, handles all the communications with the schools on KidsPack, but also organizes the certificates for almost 250 families so they may have a brighter Thanksgiving. She's calm, organized, empathetic, and patient, and very patient, with the changes that are going on around us all the time. And as Tom says, and we do too, we appreciate her talent, and Thompson and School District is blessed to have an outstanding employee like this. So congratulations, Theresa. You certainly are somebody that should be recognized because of what you do. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And they give you this too, Theresa. Matt Hughes. Come on up, Matt. He's nominated by Courtney Peters, and she's a parent of Ellie Peters, who's a graduate of Community Connections. Eric and I cannot tell you how thankful we are that you were in High Plains building the day we walked in, desperate and praying for someone. Anyone could assist us at the end of the school year last year. At that time, we felt alone, scared, and struggling to keep our daughter safe in the one place she spent the most time. The one place she should feel safest, other than home. We are so incredibly thankful for the special bond you created over the past year with Ellie. This friendship, kinship, has meant so much, not only to us, but Ellie as well. We as parents really are very blessed to have such amazing people in her life to help support her during the difficult times she has been experiencing, and you are definitely one of the key people in her life. Thank you. It should be shouted from the rooftops what an amazing educator Thompson School District has in you, and the fact that he works with at-risk kids, well, he's so good at what he does, shows how we parents are so lucky to have the right person in the correct position at the right time. We need more educators like you. Thank you for being such a caring educator and person in general. This school district, this school, this district, this city, gosh, world really is a better place because of you. What a wonderful thing to say. Congratulations. Now, this is the real test because Wendy says everybody's here. We'll see if they are not.
Great.
All right. Let's see. Garrett, Aaron, Stuart, Jason, Connor, Jessica, Rachel. Are you all here? Right, they're all here. Come on up. This is from Charlie Carter, our Director of Special Education. And by the way, I have a thing in my throat tonight, so I apologize. I haven't been yelling at anybody today. I just have something going on with my, this is flu season. That's why we don't particularly want you to go up and shake anybody's hand, because they may give you something, okay? This is from Charlie. I am writing to acknowledge some very deserving individuals for the Inspiring Students Award. As you know, we are experiencing a critical shortage of qualified special education teachers and service providers. These include speech-language pathologists, occupational therapists, audiologists, teachers of the visually impaired, teachers of the deaf, and school psychologists. This shortage has significant ramifications, particularly for the delivery of services for students with disabilities. In our special ed program, we have tried to be creative about how to solve this ongoing problem of recruitment and retention. Formerly, TSD has not utilized school psychology interns, and so we propose starting a program as a way to grow our own staff. And both Dr. Margaret Crespo and Dr. Bill Siebers, who you all know well, supported this endeavor by collaborating, communicating, and securing resources to make this a reality. Very creative stuff these two have done, by the way. And I will personally take care of them because I'll buy their next meal or something like that. I would be remiss if I did not point out that they are strong supporters of students with disabilities. We needed current school psychologists to supervise the interns for a year. This is not a simple task as they must meet very stringent guidelines established by CDE and the institutions of higher education. 3 of our school psychologists stepped up to this leadership role, and they are Garrett Hankey, Aaron Klingensmith, and Stuart Conkright. Would you raise your hand so they know who you are? All right. Thank you. They have done an excellent job supporting our interns, giving them a meaningful and robust experience that will prepare them to enter the field with a diverse skill set. Additionally, Jason Hanford, ESS coordinator, has provided administrative support to this program, school psychologists, supervisors, and the interns. Our 3 interns have far exceeded our expectations, and they are Connor Delavik, Jessica Lynch, and Rachel Lee. Congratulations. These individuals have taken on the same responsibilities as our school psychologists to serve students and to support and collaborate with staff and families, even though they receive a very small salary to do so. Their work is extremely challenging, yet the quality of their work has been exceptional. They have represented TSD well through their commitment, innovation, competence, and professionalism. As they finish their internships at the end of this school year, it is our hope, our real hope, that they will give serious consideration to remaining in the school district. We greatly appreciate the work that they have done on behalf of our students. Very special program with some very special people, and we want to thank all of you very much. Thank you. And with that, do the honor of by giving this young one a special badge of Thompson. Hopefully someday she'll come along and become another one of these school psychologists.
That is the goal.
Again, thank you all. Future class. Future class. Madam President, that concludes our recognition of wonderful people in the school district. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Scheer. And I'd like to echo what Dr. Scheer said about, to the interns specifically, please do consider Thompson School District when you're looking for employment. And we appreciate all you've done this year. 2?
Oh, yes.
Awesome. All right. Okay, so that takes care of 4.1, Inspiring Student Awards. Next is Superintendents Report, item 4.2. Dr. Scheer, do you have a report tonight?
Yes, I do. Tonight I wanted to talk briefly and sincerely about our current focus on security in the school district. It certainly is an issue that is on everybody's mind. It's a very painful thing for the folks in Florida, and also for all of us to even think about something awful like this happening. It's such an evil thing, it's hard to even comprehend. But I thought at least we ought to take a moment to let the board know that this has been a serious issue for us for a number of years. A bit of history. When I came to the school district 5.5 years ago, we did not have a resource officer in Berthoud. We had them in the other schools, but we didn't down there. And the school district stepped up to make sure that that was taken care of. In addition to that, We did not have a security plan in place. We did not have anything that resembled a plan that was cohesive in terms of coordination with our buildings, 34 schools. We have that now. We did not have a security officer. We originally appointed a assistant principal who had a background in law enforcement who began, his name was Rick Fry, and did a great job of building capacity for us in this area with planning and also our manuals and all of that. And today, we now have a retired police officer who provides direction and leadership and is overall in support of our security and some other things that we're doing there. I want to qualify this by saying that this is always a work in progress. You never complete this task of doing everything you possibly can to be protective of the students in our district. We have a very strong relationship with the county sheriff's office and also with Loveland PD, and we appreciate that very much. They communicate, we communicate. And in a whole variety of ways, there's a lot of things going on a regular basis to deal with not only responding to situations, but trying as much as we possibly can to anticipate situations, including threat assessments and other kinds of things that they are very cooperative with us on. Again, I share this not because I feel like we've arrived in terms of this issue, but we do have a focus on it, and we do have people in place who, on a daily basis, it's their job to work on this issue, and we are definitely, I think, in a better place than we were. 5 years ago, we didn't have single point of access. We do today. And a number of other things, some things I prefer not to say much about because, quite frankly, we don't want to create a sense of what everything is all about so that we create a vulnerability for our schools. I also want to take this opportunity through my reporting to ask Dr. Crespo to come up for just a moment to provide some additional information to the board and to the community. So at this time, if it's okay, I would like for Dr. Crespo to talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Scheer, Margaret Crespo. I'm the Chief Academic Officer here in Thompson, and part of my role is to oversee safety and security in the district. And some of the things that a few months ago we were here, and Jesse Lunsford, who's our security manager, shared some of the things that we've been doing as we forwarded the Claire Davis policies. And part of that process, as Dr. Scheer mentioned, is to really have a clear vision around student safety and security, knowing that we do have vulnerabilities and that we want the experience to be pleasant for students and families and be a welcoming environment, but at the same time provide the highest level of safety and security that we can. So, so an example that we've worked on over the last, apparently I'm metallic, that we've worked on over the last couple of months include things like, or the last couple of years rather, include things, as was mentioned, that point of access, making sure that we've got cameras that are updated, certainly need more, things like threat assessments, and then you all had the opportunity to visit one of our centers just recently, which is a great idea of kind of how we look at what happens in schools on a regular basis. We're building partnerships, which is very exciting. We've been doing that work for the last couple of years with the Department of Human Services, the Department of Homeland Security, and other partners. As Dr. Scheer mentioned, our relationship with law enforcement is excellent, and we're always looking to enhance that. We've been very, very impressed. Our staff and administrators have really worked hard on tabletop discussions and drill and practice to make sure that we are comfortable and prepared in crisis. We think back to years ago, when you think about fire drills, you practice those because you don't want to be in that situation. And it's very similar in the philosophy that we use around practicing on a regular basis for any event that might happen related to schools. We also have an emergency operations plan that some of you, actually all of you, have kind of seen pieces of as we've presented, and expected by the state, as well as national guidelines. And we also have all of our staff take certain classes that are provided by NIMS training, so National Incident Management System. And they provide training so that people are up to date both at home and in schools as to what that looks like. The other piece for us over the last couple of months is we have an expulsion program. Sadly, when we have to expel our kids, we want to make sure that we're staying in touch with them over time and that those social emotional pieces are in place. And over the last couple of months, we've worked very hard to tighten that up. So that our students are engaged as much as possible and available for them. And we hope to be bringing some information over the next couple of months around some successes in that area. The last thing I'll say is we could not do this work without some amazing staff. And you met some of them through this update recently. Just really incredible people committed to building those relationships, are always available and aware. You know, and security is not something that people really want to talk about all the time because it makes you feel vulnerable. And they do an excellent job of communicating with families and parents and our buildings to make sure that they can feel as safe as they can. So I'm here to answer any questions, but that's really just the update.
Thank you, Dr. Crespo. Any questions for her right now? No. Thank you. Dr. Scheer?
Oh, that's it.
You're all
Thank you.
through. Thank you. Thank you so much for the update. That takes us at this point to board and committee reports, which is item 4.3. I'm going to start down this end with Mark and just head down this way.
Let's see. So went to a CCFLT luncheon, and it was really exciting to see Dr. Scheer and Dr. Crespo receive an award for their support in dual language immersion and very cool programs. It's so exciting to see Thompson and how represented Thompson was at that luncheon. How many awards came right from this district? There's some very exciting things going on in this district in regard to learning languages and international. Very excited. Congratulations. Also went to my DAC committee, and the committee is putting together the results that have been gathered through the year in preparation for a presentation.
Nothing? Okay. Barb?
I went to early childhood meetings as well as working on the calendar with the group that's there. And then I attended, I went to Kids Pack, and then I also attended a dinner that was held for one of the sponsors, and it was real pleasant. So.
Okay, thank you. I just would like to remind everyone that tomorrow night at 5 p.m. at Loveland High School is the 3rd annual Thompson School District Wellness Night, which is put on by the school district and the folks at Thompson Cares, which is part of the school district. That's like a little separate group that handles these. And it's the focus is resilience, riding the wave, and they will have breakout sessions for students and secondary students, for parents, community members, and for staff as well. And there will be a keynote speaker, which is very timely, actually, is Frank DeAngelis, who was the principal at Columbine at the time of the Columbine school shooting incident. And so he will be speaking not so much about the incident and those things, but how he dealt with that in his life and how he developed resilience and hope going forward. So I would encourage, there's food. First come, first serve. I believe there's some Chick-fil-A food, and there is childcare, first come, first serve, and there are translators from interpreters for Spanish. So all those things are provided. It'll be a wonderful, there's door prizes, so it'll be a wonderful and informative night. So I'd encourage you folks to come out, and you can come for all of it or part of it, or you can drop in, drop out kind of thing. It runs from about 5 till about 8:30, I think. The speaker, Frank DeAngelis, will speak at 7:30. Thank you, Dr. Crespo. So that's all I have. Pam.
I attended the Thompson Education Foundation board meeting, and I have 2 things to report from that meeting. Next Friday, March 2nd at 7 a.m. at Embassy Suites, the Thompson Education Foundation is hosting the 10th annual Educator Appreciation Breakfast. And this event celebrates all Thompson educators as well as some of the Thompson Education Foundation highlights from the past year. So all board members should have received that invitation in the mail, the email. No? Okay. If not, you can go to the TEF website at thompsontef.org to register, so.
That's the first,
That's
correct?
Friday, March 2nd.
Second.
Yeah. So next Friday, 7 a.m., bright and early. Some of us are going to be out at the Boys and Girls Club breakfast tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. out at Embassy Suites as well. So anyway, so if you want to go to thompsontef.org to register, that'd be great. And then an announcement for everybody. The Great Idea Classroom grant applications are open. And the Great Idea Classroom grants are for teachers to apply for funding support of a classroom project. Something special maybe that you've been wanting to do during the next school year, 2018-2019. All applications are due by 4:30 p.m. Monday, March 5th. And applications, once again, are on the TEF website, thompsontef.org. So teachers, if you need some funding for a classroom project, be sure to check that out. Thanks.
Thank you. Jeff
Nothing to report.
and Dave.
The Master Planning Committee met a couple of times in the past month. They're doing a great job, and they're going to present later on today.
Thank you. That takes us to public comment, item 4.4.
My statement.
Do we have the list here?
We have two people.
Okay, hold on. Let me have Pam read the statement,
to
and then
read
you
my
can go ahead and call.
Okay.
Do this in order.
Because the board wants to hear the viewpoint of the public and also needs to conduct its business in an orderly and efficient manner, we have scheduled time during the regular board meetings for comments from the public. The board has set aside an unlimited time for public participation prior to the business portion of each meeting on the first and third Wednesday of the month. The time for each speaker is limited to 3 minutes, and each individual will only be recognized once, and the board will not respond to comments or questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Paul.
First up, we have Mary Lou Rogers.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Superintendent, Madam President, members of the board. I'm Mary Lou Rogers. I'm here for two reasons. It's kind of an honor to follow those last two big presentations. My first was to say thank you to every educator in Thompson School District, to the bus drivers who are the first ones to greet our kids in the morning, to the secretaries, to the custodians, to the principal. I've worked for several principals who made it a big deal to help serve lunches in the cafeteria, to make that personal relationship. Certainly the special ed, the paraprofessionals, all the specialists in the building, from counselors to librarians. I just want to say thank you for making our school district great, to make our kids feel welcome, to feel safe, and to enhance their learning from where they come in and where they're going. Thank you to all administrators, everybody that works so hard in this building to make sure that all of the folks in the buildings have what they need, and certainly principals that I've mentioned before. I also want to thank the community. When you think about the businesses who provide internships and entry-level jobs, or provide release time for their employees to go volunteer in our schools, to the faith community. Many of our churches have mentoring programs that they go into schools and help kids or provide after-school resources. What a great community that our district is honored to be in. And that leaves me to my big thank you tonight to Tom and Corinne Kerrigan, who bring leadership through the Rotary Group Kids Pack that provides food for our food insecure kids on the weekend. I'm honored to be one of the volunteers in that group. It's phenomenal, it's fun, it's wonderful. The leadership that they bring, the support of our volunteers, and certainly different organizations that come and volunteer every week with us, to those who provide food and checks, and you've heard those, you'll hear from Tom later tonight, and all the wonderful things that he does. It's an amazing thing. Hopefully he's going to do a big commercial for our big food drive, which will be March 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Please shop in Loveland and consider buying some food and donating for our food drive. It's an amazing community and that supports an amazing school district. Thank you to each and every one of you for making this such a great place to be. Thank you.
Next, we have Robert Trout.
Evening. I am coming to you tonight. Sal, come on up here, buddy. I'm sorry. As the coordinator of LIM, Loveland Initiative for Monarch Butterflies, that I've spoken to you before about. And I'm here to honor the man who really started this for us, and that's Dr. Shearer. I can still remember almost 3 years to the day I asked for a meeting with him, never met the man. And I went in, and he just made me feel so comfortable and right on with what I was proposing to do with some land out by Wall Clark that had just been cleared of cottages. And I had some pictures, but we don't have a way to get them to show you, but it's absolutely beautiful out there. And so I wanted to present this license plate cover to Dr. Shearer. Okay. It says, "Got milkweed, ? TSD does."
That's nice. That's pretty.
Joining me up here, just so you know, is Sal Miller. He's the science teacher I work with at the school at Wall Clark, and my wife, Marinda, who makes it all possible for me to get up here and do stuff like this. So thank you to them.
Thank you. And I believe that brings us to the end of public comment. Thank you. Next up is the action consent items. Item 5.1, approval of personnel extra duty and coaching recommendations, and approval of gifts and donations. And we will take those up together unless anyone wants to separate them out. No, I would like to just comment before we vote on those, mainly for the new members of the board. This time of year is retirement time of year. It's when everybody puts their retirement in. So that's why the list of retirements is larger than what we usually see. And on a personal note, I'm feeling really old because a lot of these teachers taught my kids, and it's touching me a little bit to see that they're ready to retire, and I'm going to miss some of them on a personal basis. But Pam, you will have the gifts to read as well. So why don't you go ahead and read the gifts, and then we'll take these two up.
Fortunately, we have quite a few gifts to thank folks for tonight. The first one was made to the administration from the city of Loveland, $3,450, which was a trailer, plus $1,000 supplies for inside the trailer. And I'm not really sure what that's about.
Really?
It's what?
A bike rodeo trailer.
Oh, okay. All right.
So we now have the bike rodeo?
Okay. Among other things. Oh, and where is this?
It'll be at transportation.
At transportation.
Safe routes to school coordinators.
Okay.
Nice.
So that clears that up for me. And then Walt Clark Middle School, and I wish Mr. Miller were still here.
Oh, yeah, and
I
Mr.
think he
Troutman.
just left. Mr. Miller runs the greenhouse program out at Walt Clark Middle School. If you've never visited it, it's phenomenal. They always have a sale every spring. And one of our former staff members who passed away, Vicki Maline, her husband, Rick Maline, started Live, Laugh, Love, Believe. And this organization has provided $6,865 for the greenhouse out at Walt Clark. So thanks to Rick Maline and Live, Laugh, Love, Believe. And thanks to Mr. Miller for doing the greenhouse at Walt Clark. The next donation was to Ferguson High School, $1,200 from Verna and Brian Cunningham for a TV monitor for the conference room. So thanks to the Cunninghams. And then Thompson Valley High School received $5,000 for materials for machining projects. And that was done from William Kenneth Carnahan. His company is Ken's CNC Machine Shop. So thank you so much to Mr. Carnahan. Then Bill Reed Middle School received $5,580 for Chromebooks from an anonymous donor. So thank you to that anonymous donor or donors. The Thompson School District received $24,000 for our LISA program throughout the district, and that came from the Aryan Foundation. Lots of you know the good work that the Aryan family does in our community, so thank you to the Aryans. Berthoud High School received $2,000 for the football program from Galetz Transportation, so thanks to that, Galetz. I hope I said that correctly, transportation. And then finally, Berthoud High School received $1,100 for student tutoring, which we all know is super important, from Carolyn Patrizzo. So thank you to Carolyn for the tutoring money. So it was a long list tonight.
Thank you. Makes up for last month.
Yeah, exactly.
So I will entertain a motion to approve the action consent items.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Great. It's been moved and seconded to approve the action consent items. Are there any questions or further discussion? No. Okay, Wendy, if you would call the roll, please.
Paul Banks,
Aye.
Pam Howard,
Aye.
Lori Vistor Ward,
Aye.
Barbara Cruz,
Aye.
Dave Levy,
Aye.
Mark Setter,
Aye.
Jeff Swanty.
Aye.
All right, those pass unanimously. Thank you. Action items next up is item 6.1, which is approval of land dedication at Thompson River Ranch.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Scheer, Margaret Crespo here to answer any questions related to the land donation.
You have to give me 1 second because I'm loading something here.
And I think could you just give us a brief overview?
Yes, I can.
That'd be awesome.
So attached, you'll see the pages that, okay, or not. 1 second.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there was
It's a
just
map. That's
one.
what it took. I was apparently hogging, so go ahead.
Attached, you'll see the documentation
One person
related
at a
to the
time.
agreement with the town of Johnstown to donate the Thompson River Ranch property. It's 16.4 acres, and there is a map of the area attached as well.
Questions, board?
Can you just remind me again, so once this is dedicated, we have a certain number of years to actually build something on the site? Is there a time limit on that or no? Okay.
Mark, did you have a question? You looked.
I was looking for the cross streets, but all of a sudden it zoomed in and showed them to me.
Oh,
So
okay.
thanks for that.
Okay. Questions, anyone? So it's basically 16.4 acres,
Yes.
big enough for a K-8? Should that be what we choose to put on there?
Yes.
That's terrific.
Very exciting.
I know we've been working on this a long time, getting
Yes.
that land dedication worked out there, and so that's exciting to finally see it happen. Any further questions, board, before I call for a motion?
Just thanks to the staff for all their hard work on this. I know it's been years.
And the stick-to-itiveness.
Yeah, years in the making.
All right, I will entertain a motion then to approve that land dedication.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the land dedication of 16.4 acres out at Thompson River Ranch as per the the documentation presented. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, Wendy, if you would call the roll, please.
Paul Banks,
Aye.
Pam Howard,
Aye.
Lori Vistor Ward,
Aye.
Barbara Cruz,
Aye.
Dave Levy,
Aye.
Mark Setter,
Aye.
Jeff Swanty.
Aye.
Thank you. That passes unanimously, board. Sorry. Thank you, Dr. Crespo. I'm trying not to feedback here. Next up is item 6.2, which is approval of water purchase.
Good evening again. I'm here to answer any questions related to the water purchase.
So you folks will remember we previously discussed this. This is the one share of Handy Ditch at $60,000. I'll entertain a motion on that one.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Great. It's been moved and seconded to approve the purchase of one share of Handy Ditch at water share at $60,000. Is there any discussion on this?
Just one quick question for clarification. PILO funds can only be used for?
Water and land.
Thank you.
this being water.
Yes.
Anybody else? All right, thank you. Wendy, call the roll, please.
Paul Banks,
Aye.
Pam Howard.
Aye.
Lori Visda Ward.
Aye.
Barbara Cruz,
Aye.
Dave Levy,
Aye.
Mark Sutter,
Aye.
Jeff Swanty.
Aye.
Thank you. That passes unanimously as well. Next item is item 6.3, which is the approval of the dress code policy, policy JICA. And again, we saw this last meeting, board. So I will entertain a motion. We can have discussion if there is any.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the revised dress code policy JICA. Is there any discussion on this item? No. Wendy, call the roll, please.
Paul Banks,
Aye.
Pam Howard.
Aye.
Lori Visda Ward.
Aye.
Barbara Cruz,
Aye.
Dave Levy,
Aye.
Mark Sutter,
Aye.
Jeff Swanty.
Aye.
Thank you, and that passes unanimously as well. Final action item tonight is item 6.4, Graduation Guidelines Policy, IKF. Again, this was presented last meeting with the changes, and I will entertain a motion to approve that one.
So moved.
And a
Second.
Great, it's been moved and seconded to approve Graduation Guidelines Policy, IKF. Is there any discussion? Wendy, if you'd call the roll, please.
Paul Banks,
Aye.
Pam Howard.
Aye.
Lori Visda Ward.
Aye.
Barbara Cruz,
Aye.
Dave Levy,
Aye.
Mark Sutter,
Aye.
Jeff Swanty.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is unanimous as well. Takes us to discussion items. Item 7.1 is Kids Pack Citywide Food Drive, and I'm assuming I have the Kerrigan, Kerrigan. I have Tom Kerrigan to come up and talk to us about this important event that's happening next 2 weeks, week and a half.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to give a little history of Kids Pack and what's coming up. Good evening, Dr. Scheer, Madam President, members of the board. Kids Pack is most a team effort. Today we currently have 20 plus Rotary members and 75 members of the community. In 2009, Jeff Douglas, a Rotarian, saw a news feature on TV regarding backpack programs exploding around the country. He inquired at Thompson schools and brought the idea to the officers at Rotary. Kids Pack started the last 8 weeks of the 2009 school year with 3 elementary schools with 34 students. Methodically, as funds were acquired, Kids Pack expanded through all elementary, middle, high schools, and finally early childhood. Today, 9 years later, volunteers created and delivered today 671 bags. We are tracking at 20,500 bags for this school year. Our 5-year total is 91,000 bags. Kids Pack also is delivering this year 30,000 snacks to 20 of our schools. Kids Pack's challenge is we are only serving 9.4% of the students on free and reduced. As you know, we have almost 6,300 by the most recent count from Nutrition Services. We are currently starting discussions with Nutrition Services on how Kids Pack may support more students during the summer. And we are ready to invest $10,000 in the summer program. The Loveland Berthoud community has stepped to fight student hunger. Kids Pack has a wide range of supporters, the faith community, terrific volunteers, growing support from the business community. I'm really excited to report that Subaru of Loveland and Subaru of America will present to Kids Pack in March with a check for $42,000. That means in the last 5 years from Share the Love, that Subaru has donated $163,000. That provides over 44,000 food bags. I also want to thank the commissioners from Larimer County. Kids Pack receives a $31,000 grant in the recent years, and we're very appreciative. Kids Pack's greatest asset is our volunteers. I want to recognize Jill Bernardino, a High Plains parent, Jacqueline Lundquist, who are co-directors of the upcoming food drive. Some people think we should have named the food drive the Stand Cheer Mac and Cheese Food Drive. And we may have more mac and cheese than Kraft has by the end of the weekend. And I also want to thank Maya Lorenz, who's the communication director, a 5-star effort by all. Thank you to Michael Hausman for spreading the word through the district. Our Loveland Berthoud community has stepped up with over 300 volunteers in our food stores March 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. This morning I commented before we packed that even people in Omaha, Nebraska know we're having a food drive. Our current status is that we have openings for people to be drivers and bringing the food back from the 9 stores. We also need some more volunteers in the stores. Our VIP guest today at packing was Linda Hoffman, our county administrator, and I look forward to seeing the board next week. There will be no contest. It's as much as you can pack. There might be an award for the fastest board member. It's a possibility we could do that.
There's a way to pack.
Also, I want to thank Barbara Cruz, Lam Caro, and Theresa Morgan for joining us as we hosted a Subaru thank you event for all they've done. Kids Pack is blessed to have the cooperation of our 3 Safeway stores this past holiday for dinners. Hundreds of dinners went to Thompson families. Dinners went to Meals on Wheels, Community Kitchen, Alternates to Violence Safe House, and veterans at the Loveland Housing Authority. Overall, Safeway customers donated at the checkout stands over $31,000. The standout store was at Wilson and Eisenhower that over $19,000 contributed. I also want to thank our board president for visiting each of the Safeway stores and thanking the managers personally for supporting Thompson students. Kids Pack is looking forward to the largest food drive in the city's history. Our goal is 20,000 pounds. Last year, each bag donated had 5 to 7 items in it. Please join us. Loveland's Mayor Jackie Walsh, our Police Chief Bob Ticer, our Fire Chief Mark Miller will be joining us. One thing, sometimes I forget to compliment our incredible drivers who take the food on 13 different routes. They love their job. On a personal note, I want to share a story that happened to me last year at a middle school here in Loveland. I was with some 20 Rotarians and we were doing the 4-way test. And as you know, Rotarians go out to all the 8th graders in the Thompson School District and we talk to them about making decisions, good decisions. And we have a dialogue for about an hour and a quarter. And as the program ended in this 8th grade class, the moderator was doing thank yous, and at the end, she said, oh, by the way, we have a Rotarian here who works on Kids Pack. And then she said dismissed, and of course, 60 people jump up and they're going in all directions. About a half minute later, I had a tap on my shoulder, and I turned it around, and it was a pretty blonde girl with a little wisp of color in her hair. And she simply said, thank you for my food. This happens a lot to our people. We get the personal stories, and you realize how much our teachers, our counselors, our administrators are concerned with every day. They are those kids that they love. To each of you, you are committed to education of all students. thank you for stepping up, and I appreciate the time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Tom, you indicated Jill and Maya, your two coordinators for the food.
Maya is doing the communications, and Jill and Jacqueline, we call them the J&J team.
Are they here? Can they-
Jill's here.
I suppose I could take my
She's
glasses
a
off.
High Plains parent.
Just give us a wave so we can see who you are. Thank you. Thank you.
Maya's here, too.
I know, and Maya is here, yeah. Thank you, guys.
I could comment that when you have a challenge, give it to a woman, because it will get done.
Any questions for Tom, guys? Thank you.
Just want to
for all
say,
you do.
Tom, how
Yeah.
much we appreciate it. Everybody in the community appreciates the work you, your wife do, and everybody else does, so.
It's a
That whole
team
gang.
effort. It's
We- we-
absolutely a
Yeah,
team
it's
effort.
incredible.
We're getting bigger, and we're trying to figure out how to handle it. The last 4 months, we've been sitting down apart from Kids Back, trying to figure out how we make Kids Back a better structure, a bigger organization for the future. So we're doing our homework along that line. And we'd not like to have this many kids hungry, but we're going to figure out what we do.
It's the bottom line.
Oh, well
I wish we didn't need you, but
It's such a well-oiled machine.
Wear
It's
these
um,
everywhere
amazing
you
to
go
watch.
for the next 2 weeks.
And then we will be packing with you on the 7th, is that
The
correct? So
7th.
that's
Yeah,
2
2 weeks.
from today. You scared me there for a
you,
minute.
my
You said
dear.
next week, and I
you, love.
panicked, but it's the
Oh,
7th.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. We'll be there the
I know, I was
7th.
like, I
Thank
think
you.
it's the 7th.
And we might just get a little competitive, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
We just might.
Tom, does your socks and your vest, Dr. Crespo, does the socks and his vest conform with the dress code?
On it goes.
They match.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.
All right, next up is item 7.2. Dr. Crespo will present to us the school utilization policy and school closure evaluation policy changes.
Evening
Or
again.
policy, I guess. Thank you.
Still me. I shared this update last week as we brought it to the board related to policy FC and FCA. So changing some of the language in FCA that you can see red lines, and then a sentence added, and then the additional FCA policy, which takes the FC policy and moves it forward to what would be the next step, FCA, related to underutilization and closure of school based on the evaluation. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Board?
It's pretty logical. I like this work. Thank you so much.
It's what we needed.
Yep. This is a great guideline.
Any questions for Dr. Crespo on this? I have a question, and maybe it's just me. In FCA, you reference FCAR. Is that attached as well? Am I missing that?
No, that's the regulation that we shared on that PowerPoint around the
Okay.
future handbook.
Okay. All right. I know I've seen it. I just couldn't remember if we've all seen it as a board. And then this will come back to us next time
For approval.
Approval for adoption. And the regulation just is attached. That's not a separate.
No, so it's not, regulation would not be board approved.
Okay.
Certainly the board would see it, and we would continue to update, because as I mentioned, and maybe I didn't, but we'll continue to build out chapters, so underutilized, overutilized, capacity enrollment, and then our hope is that maintenance backlog will be added to that.
Any questions? All right. Thank you.
Great. I just want to thank
We'll see this
MPC
next time.
and the team, so thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you. And they are next. So 7.3 is Master Plan Committee update. And is that you or is,
Yes, it's me.
okay. Oh, I didn't know if you had a
No, I'm
MPC
getting my
member.
steps in tonight
Okay.
is the goal. So, okay, so good evening. I'm here to update on MPC. One, I'd just like to say thank you very much. We have asked MPC to meet more often, so typically MPC meets on a monthly basis, and we've added a couple of subcommittees, and they have been meeting on an ongoing basis and really just taking the time out because they feel that this is super valuable work and very important, and I want to honor that. They met tonight from 5 to 6-ish regarding community outreach. So if you remember during our last board update, we shared that we had started to do some work around the utilization, which is this policy that we've brought forward. And then we broke up into 3 subcommittees, which include community outreach, enrollment capacity, and maintenance backlog. At one point, maintenance backlog was called deferred maintenance, and we felt that that was not an appropriate name, so MPC renamed that group. They've been doing, all 3 groups have been doing amazing work. One of those pieces that came out was the need to go out to the community, and during our last update, we shared that we had planned to immediately go forth and start connecting with community. So I'm proud to say that our first community outreach meeting was last Thursday. We were very fortunate that Berthoud Community had their feeder SAC PTA meeting, and we had about 60 people there. It was really very exciting to have all of those families, parents and community come out, and we had a number of MPC members that were present as well. We had a discussion where we used a format that really allowed for some feedback. We just shared very brief information around MPC's work and why we were there and what we were hoping for, which really was an opportunity to hear what the community values around their schools and what they hope for their students. That conversation led to a lot of questions. We asked for champions. So one of our asks, we had really just 2 asks. One was feedback on all that we had provided, and I'll go into that briefly here in a second. And the second was, were there people in the community that wanted to become champions of this work as we move forward with MPC? Super excited to say that we had 12 families or 12 emails that were left for communication, and they have shown an interest in becoming champions of this work in their own community. So part of the process was to come in as a group, break into those 3 subcommittees that I talked about, which include enrollment capacity, maintenance backlog, and enrollment capacity, community outreach. Yeah, thank you. And sometimes it starts to run together. And the feedback from that was as follows. 1, we heard from our community that one of their, related to growth, one of their key concerns coming out of and obviously this will all be provided in notes, I'm just giving an update, was to a strong value around keeping 5th grade as long as possible at the elementary schools so that they stay where they are. Concerns related to the growth, the technology needs, making sure we have quality teachers in classrooms, and keeping K-5 small with the understanding that middle schools and high schools would have to be larger. Really looking at neighborhood schools versus larger schools. Modulars are okay, but preference for buildings. Class sizes, and making sure that we're reactive, that we're not reactive, but that we're proactive. There are also some conversations around boundary changes, needs for K-8, and innovative ways to look at funding because they understand the funding model at the state. Around communication, they had lots of great suggestions about how do we get out there and make sure that we're proactive versus reactive, and came up with a number of places and considerations that we could talk about. One of the really cool ideas, they're all amazing, but one of the really cool ideas was we use yard signs during elections, and people really pay attention to that. How do we use yard signs on a regular basis just to be proactive around our school, because people drive by that all the time. We also talked around maintenance backlog, and what we did was took the scorecards, realigned those specifically, and I just want to give a shout out to facilities and operations and maintenance because they turned this around in a matter of a week when they really have other things that they need to do as well, and they just were amazing. Pulled all of these lists together. Here's an example. We went to each group and we asked them to prioritize their list based on that maintenance backlog, things including plumbing, fire systems upgrade, HVAC, asbestos abatement, door hardware, the list goes on and on. You're all familiar with it because it's on our website around those priorities. And we asked the community to prioritize what those were for them as a community in Berthoud. And what we realized was we needed to have deeper conversation. So when we have a conversation and families feel very concerned around safety and security, that was the number one, was safety and security, making sure our kids are safe, and certainly that's a priority for us as well. The second, ironically, was air conditioning, making sure that our kids have a healthy environment. And in that conversation, what we realized was that often people feel like, well, just put an air conditioner on the roof. That's great, except you need a new roof. So we really have to come across as a project piece, really having that discussion around the fact that when you change X, Y is impacted. And how do we communicate that in a way that makes sense for people? Because even for me in my own household, when I need to change a door, I just go to Home Depot and I buy the door and I put the door in. And yes, I put the door in. And how do we make sure that people understand that we are permit required and that we have to get all kinds of information and approval to make those projects work? So the feedback for us was making sure that as we move through this process, that we build these conversations around projects. And we really work with people to understand that there are impacts and things that sometimes people don't think about. And then the last thing that I want to share is the growth conversation. For us, the birthed community is growing, and there was a lot of clearing up of information around what that growth looks like and where it's happening, and the fact that enrollment capacity in the district and other places may not have the same impact. In some places it's growth, and in some places it's diminishing growth, and how do we make sure that we're addressing those needs as well? So just a quick shout out again to MPC. Really appreciate the fact that there were a lot of community members there. Definitely out to the birthed community for coming out and sharing their insight, because really what we're looking for is feedback. And then the next 2 meetings are Monday evening at Walt Clark, and that is a joint Walt Clark Bill Reed meeting, because their feeders are so connected, and obviously the same for Thompson Valley Loveland High. They're also invited, and those communications have gone out to families, inviting them. And then the next meeting is on Tuesday evening, so if you have 2 nights where you have nothing to do and you want to come give feedback twice, that's great. And we will be doing that meeting at Conrad Ball. And then there will be a following meeting at Irwin later on in the month, and you have all of those dates because we've provided them. And then the last comment that I will make is we will be putting together a draft of community meetings. So shout out again to the community and MPC for providing some ideas around where to go communicate to people, around where we're going to get the best input and feedback. So we'll be coordinating those meetings as well, and MPC will be volunteering to run that process, because we certainly want to make sure that it's a community engaging activity. Can I answer any questions? Yes, sir.
Is Dr. Crespo, the community does not have students in the school system, how well are they attending? What's your outreach to them?
So our first impact has been to the schools directly for parents, asking them, you're in your community, how do we communicate with those individuals who may not have kids in the community? And what we've gotten is, actually I have a list of about 200 places that I could probably go. I can't do that with the team, but we will be heading to places like Rotary, Elks. I'm not trying to eliminate any other clubs, but any other local clubs and civic organizations. We are working on some relationships that we've got with local surgeons organizations and fire and other places where there's community outreach, community centers. There's actually a whole list that I don't have with me right now that includes realtors, grand families. I do have some of them. Making sure that kids are involved in the process as well. And then some of the assisted living communities, which is a little bit more difficult because of their rules, but we feel that we've got some impact to have some conversation there as well.
Questions down here?
Just a technical thing. Could you add all the meeting dates onto the website? And on the Thompson website, you go into, the committees. It's not on there.
Okay, I'll get with Mike.
Yeah, could you please? Yeah.
Yep.
Just so that, anybody wants to see where the next
Yep.
scheduled meeting is, they can see that. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Next up, item 7.4 is acceptable use policy JS, student and GBEE staff. And this is Matt Kuhn.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Scheer. I'm Matt Kuhn, the Executive Director of the Innovative Technology Services Department. And I'm here to discuss for your approval 2 policies. One called the Student Acceptable Technology Use Policy and Agreement, and the other one called the Staff Use of Technology and Electronic Communications. The first one, the Student AUP, Acceptable Use Policy. That one, when I first started looking at it about 4 months ago when I started new here in the district, I knew that solid policy was a very important thing as I started my new job here. So I took a look at where we were at with those policies, and they had not been updated since 2012. They were first initiated in 1998. updated 4 times between that and 2012. And then in the last 6 years, as you can imagine, technology has evolved quite a bit. A lot can happen in the technology world in that amount of time. So there was a lot of changes needed to the policy. There's also been some new law since that time, the Colorado Data Privacy Act for students. So there was a lot of things I needed to get into that policy, and I realized that really a rewrite was better than a revision. So that's why when you try to pull up the documents, you'll see the strike-throughs aren't all that helpful for you, really, because it's been completely done from a clean slate with CASB guidance and CASB boilerplate put into it, but also all the new pieces I needed to put in there. So I'll highlight some of the changes in the new policy, since it's pretty hard for you to probably see the changes compared to the old. First off, there's 2 categories now of technology in the new policy. So the old policy just talked about technology as if it was one monolithic thing, just technology. But the new policy breaks technology into 2 categories, curricular technology and enhancing technology. So in some cases, technology is an integral part of the curriculum. For example, if you have like a digital math textbook or something like that, you can't really do without it to teach that course. So that would be a curricular technology. Or if it's something organizational, like you're using a learning management system like Schoology or Google Classroom, and you're using that for all of your assignments and the organization of your class, that is also a curricular technology because it's required for the class to work. Other technologies are more enhancing in nature, like if you're a football coach and you have analyzing technology that takes videos of students and shows, where they're hitting the ball with a baseball bat or something like that. It's not going to stop you from graduating if you weren't able to use that technology. It's an enhancing technology, not a curricular technology. So the reason to break them into 2 different groups is because in the old policy, we had just technology monolithically, and you could opt out of that. So if you were a teacher and a student in your class was opted out of technology with the old policy, all technology is off the board. So if you're in one of those situations where you have a lot of curricular technology going on, like we do these days, you're in a bad position with your students, attempting to still somehow get them taught while the rest of the class is using this curricular technology that they're not allowed to use. So we're saying now that the curricular technology in the new policy is a requirement, that you can't opt out of it. Much like when you went to school and you had a math textbook, your parent didn't say, we don't like math, so therefore my kid doesn't use the math textbook. You would say, no, that's not possible. If they're taking this course, they have to use the math textbook. So we have curricular technologies that we're now saying are required technologies. We still have the enhancing technologies that parents can still opt their students out of. So if there's a particular kind of communication technology that the yearbook club uses at the high school and you don't like that, you could opt your kid out of those enhancing technologies that don't hurt their chances for graduation or their chance to take any particular required course. So that's a big difference. And then if there's any technology that's neither enhancing technology or curricular technology, then it's a banned technology. So we're saying if it doesn't fall into any educational purpose, whether it be curricular or enhancing, then it's not needed. It's not something we should be using in our schools. That conserves our bandwidth and our precious resources for those technologies that we actually need. So that's a big change. A few more changes to the student policy. Added guidelines for home use and parent-controlled filtering. Back in 2012, we didn't have a whole lot of technology going home. There's more technology going home now, so we're giving guidance to parents on how they can control their own networks and filter some of the things that they might want to filter in their own home environment. Another one, definitions of accidental, neglectful, or malicious damage or loss or theft, and consequences and procedures that follow. Also because more technology is in the students' hands, moving around, going home with them, and sometimes they neglectfully or maliciously break that equipment, and that wasn't in the old policy about what do we do when that sort of thing happens. And then lastly, with the student one, a big change is we wrote it to be easily put on the online registration system. So years ago, we didn't have this on the online registration system, but now we do, and each year a parent can sign off on it every single year when they re-register their student for school. And it used to be that these policies were in 2 pieces. We had the policy and we had the parent agreement. And that's really hard for the online thing. We need to put it together so that the policy can be read and then you can see you're agreeing to that policy. So it really needs to be in the same place rather than two separate documents. So it's easier for parents to see what they're agreeing to as they re-register their students. So that's the student acceptable technology use policy and agreement. Before I go on to the staff use of technology and electronic communications, I'll entertain any questions you may have about the student one.
Just a simple question, Dr. Kuhn. Can a device that the school provides, can it have filters built into that machine that serve the purpose of what we want the filters to do?
Yes and no. It depends on the machine. Certain machines and certain operating systems have more built-in filtering capabilities than others. So I'll give you an example. An iPad does have something we can do that locks filtering into it even when it gets into another network. So if they went to Starbucks, for example, with one of our iPads, got on Starbucks network, it would still have some basic filtering locked into it. That's because we can manage that very tightly through a software called Jamf. Other software, like the Chromebooks operating system, a little harder to lock that one when it goes onto another network, but there still is some basic stuff. It's not as good as what we have on the iPads, though.
Is this a concern to you? I mean, I don't know if it should be or...
Well, it's always a concern, and even in our own school environment, we have trouble with filtering because students can go off of our network and go onto the towers. So when they have their own personal cell phone and they don't like the filtering that we're providing, they just turn off our Wi-Fi and they go onto tower systems and their own data plans, and they're wide open. They can get to anything they want. So, you know, it's a little bit of a myth that we can control our environment completely. And then there's other problems as well. Certain apps like Snapchat, for example, they purposely try to engineer themselves to get past filtering systems because they see our teenagers as their clients, and they don't like it that we filter Snapchat away from them. Now, we have managed to filter Snapchat to a certain level, but they're always attempting to get past us. So it's a constant battle. So yes, I am concerned about it, and I am actively fighting the battle every day, but I know that there are ways around it in certain instances.
Okay, that's fair enough answer. Thank you.
There's one section in the student that's been almost all of it has been striked out, but there's one section that was still there. And is that carried over into the new one then?
Actually, a lot of things were carried over into the new one, but they were rewritten in such a way that I couldn't say it was like verbatim carryover. So that one section that I didn't strike out was almost exactly that way. I just kind of took it and pulled it right over.
I just didn't.
Yeah, it's in a different spot though.
Okay.
And really, if you look at the old policy, almost everything in it is in the new one. It's just in a different place and worded slightly differently. Except for the changes I mentioned, you won't find those in the old policy.
Okay.
I have a question when you talk about splitting out the curricular and the enhancing.
Mm-hmm.
Did we actually have students who were opted out of all of internet use?
Yes.
And technology?
Yes, and when this happens, I'm not saying it's like all the time.
Right.
You know, it's not like tons of students, but when it does happen, it's extremely disruptive to that teacher. They have to try to do kind of a Plan B lesson plan for that kid or even kids in some instances. Sometimes when it happens, it seems to happen in more than one because maybe there's 2 or 3 in a class. And when it does occur, it's double work on the teacher, basically.
And so if you were opting out, were you opting out of the child's use of or the child's exposure entirely to? For instance, if the teacher was showing a YouTube video.
It would be just a child's use because it's
so
impossible.
The child didn't get a device.
Yeah, it's impossible to say, you know, the teacher can't present something in front of you, right? But if there was a device to be used, the kid couldn't use the device. If they had to do some research on the
in the
internet,
library.
if they had to do word processing, you know, it was a lot of stuff. Yeah.
So do you foresee that this is going to be a problem now?
There'll still be some parents, I think, that will not like the thought. There always are, you know, and we have over 16,000 students, so that's a lot of parents. There's certainly some parent out there that doesn't like technology. In my own experience, I've had parents break iPads over their knee right in front of me because they hated technology so much. So there's certainly people that don't like it, and they won't like the thought of it being required for schooling.
We do get
But it's a
reimbursed if that
tiny
happens, right? We charge them for those? You know, you
The
cannot
vast
like the
majority of
technology,
parents, I
but...
think, will be happy to see the difference and that we know there's a difference.
Okay. Any more questions, board, on that one? And then you have the
Staff one, yeah, I
employee
mean,
one.
yeah, I'd like to talk about the
Yep.
staff one for a moment, okay? So for the staff use of technology and electronic communications, that one was more up-to-date, you might say. So it only needed a revision instead of a full rewrite, so the strike-through should be helpful for you on that one. But it does have some new pieces in it. First off, it has a broader definition because the old one really talked mostly about like use of the internet. And instead, that's been brought into technology in general, because technology includes a lot of things. Obviously, the internet's a big piece of that, but there's more to it than just the internet. Tighter alignment with Federal Children's Internet Protection Act and the Colorado Student Data Transparency and Security Act. So the old one didn't call those out specifically. It had some language around them, but they've been called out specifically now. And the student data privacy one didn't exist in the last revision of the staff one, so that's been brought in some too. Number 3, addition of regulation against unauthorized remoting in. So basically, the old policy didn't talk much about unauthorized control of somebody's computer. And that has become more of a problem where a technician, for example, in my department might remote into a teacher's computer without their permission. And it doesn't have to be a technician. It could be a student. It could be another teacher. If they know how to do it, there are ways to take over another person's computer without their knowledge. So we wanted to put that in there that's not okay to break somebody's privacy and be getting into their computer without their authorization. And then lastly, some added consequences for vandalism. We have had some situations where some staff members have, maybe they were leaving the district and they were disgruntled in some way or something and they vandalized their computer, like on the way out the door. So we added some consequences for that sort of thing of it's basically the same sort of thing of vandalizing any equipment of the school district, but we called it out in technology as well. So questions about the staff AUP?
I have a question about how this is put out to staff. When somebody's hired, or this is a new policy, so maybe everybody, is there a training on this or a...
Well, I'll give you my interpretation of that, but I'm sure Dr. Siebers could add more if need be. But essentially, when you're hired, you're given a number of policies, this being one of them. You're supposed to read it, and you're supposed to sign off on it that you understand it. I wouldn't say there isn't like a training that goes with it. It's not to say we couldn't do that. And really, data privacy, I have thought, needs some training around it. So once this policy is in effect, I could start a data privacy training because we do need some, that law that I mentioned there, the new one, there is some needed understanding amongst our staff around that law. But right now, it's really just you're hired, here's the policy, make sure you understand it, sign off on it, and that's about it. Dr. Siebers, did I get that right? Okay.
I think looking towards maybe during orientation or, something, sure, it's easy to say, yeah, I read it.
You're right.
You know?
And the same thing with the student one. I mean, a lot of people, I'm sure, sign it without reading it, but at least gives us some legal backing for when they break the policy.
Or you've read it, you've got more than one kid. You've read it for one kid 3 years ago, and you're like, yeah, I'm just going to sign this for every one of my kids every year, and you don't think to stop and read it. And it's changed, right? It's a big
changed,
change. So.
yeah, pretty dramatically.
Well, I will read mine next year, I promise.
One big change from the old one with the student one is we used to do with the student one only requiring, I think it was at 5th and 9th grade or something like that, where they had to re-sign it. Now, since it's part of the online registration system, it's a yearly thing that you have to agree to it.
Any other questions, board? No?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. All right, so that will come back to us next time then, board, for approval. And Gordon, item 7.5 is 2018-2019 budget update and enrollment update. Oh, there we go.
Madam President, Dr. Scheer, members of the board, I'm Gordon Jones, Chief Financial Officer for the district. Thank you for the opportunity to present once again the budget development update for this meeting. The focus of this presentation will be on the enrollment numbers, which is obviously a critical piece of developing the budget for the coming year. Some of the considerations that go into setting that enrollment number for what we think our student count is going to be. There are a variety of different things from the planning department to HR to business services. It's really a group effort here in analyzing a lot of different things. Some of those considerations that are taken into account are the historical pupil membership counts for the district itself, the current pupil membership count, which is an updated weekly report, 5 a.m. Monday mornings, that count comes out, or that report, which shows pupil membership by school in the district. The choice in and out statistics, or number of students that choice in and out of Thompson School District, residential certificates of occupancy, or COs, that have been issued over the last year and are anticipated to be issued into the next year. That's a primary role or duty that's performed by the planning department. There's ratios that are associated with each type of housing unit, whether it's a single family attached, single family detached, price points of those homes, sizes of those homes. There's yield rates that dictate historically what we can typically expect from a student count perspective out of each of those types of homes. So that's an important consideration. There's modeling that's done by the planning department, looking across the entire district, all the housing developments that we have. Currently, the methods that's being used is 11 models. 11 different models are run district-wide, and when I say models, those could be looking at the last 5 years. It could be the average of the last 5 years, the average of the last 5 years with the highest year excluded, the average of the last 5 years with the lowest average excluded, a variety of different models like that that give a pretty good representation to compensate for any of the anomalies that might take place. So if we had one particularly high year and then 4 low years, that model might work best. So all of those models are considered. There's discussions that take place, again, between the planning department, Skip Armatoski, Dr. Siebers, Dr. Crespo, and myself in looking at those numbers, the trends that are out there, and trying to determine what that might look like from a student count perspective. Just like the district-wide model, there are 8 school-specific models that are out there that are considered as well, much the same type of pattern. So as we know, there's more growth in the Berthoud area than there is in the rest of the district, as Dr. Crespo alluded to, or not alluded to, mentioned specifically in the MPC update. So those considerations for those particular schools could be an outlier from what the rest of the schools look like in the district. We look at it from a grade level, not just a school level, but a grade level, so we know how many seniors are exiting the system, how many kindergartners we expect to be coming into the system, comparing those counts. Again, a lot of trending to see what is taking place across the district to try to arrive at an accurate number. We look at the trends of our neighboring districts, what's taking place across the district or across the area in northern Colorado with some of our neighbors. We have those discussions both from a planning perspective and from a business services perspective to know what's taking place in the other areas, other districts in the area. Then there's also the pupil membership, which is the head count. So you'll hear different terminology here. There's pupil membership, head count, student count. All those things are the actual number of bodies that are in those seats on the count day that we have. And then you'll hear funded pupil count. The biggest difference between the actual number of pupils that are in the district and the funded pupil count, which is what program funding is based on. So how the state sets the funding that the district will receive is funded pupil count. The biggest single adjustment there is that the state funds kindergarten at 50%, actually 58%, because it's half-day kindergarten at 50%, plus an 8% factor that they apply to the funding formula. So that's the single biggest adjustment that you'll see between funded pupil count and head count. Funded pupil count will always be less than the total head count that we have. These next slides are a graphical representation of how Thompson School District compares to some of our neighbors from a variety of different things. And the way this presentation is structured is at the back of it, that is posted on board docs and that hopefully the board has in front of them, is the appendix that has the tables with the actual numbers that represent each of these data points for each of the districts. But what you can see here in the darker blue color is Thompson School District. Around that 15,000 student mark up to 16,278 is the 2017-18 count. So over the last 10 years, or this 10-year period, which is a 9-year growth trend, you can see what each of the districts in the area has done. The percentage change for each of those districts goes from an annualized average, and these are annualized averages over that 9-year growth period. Thompson School District is at 0.69% growth from the first year to the last year, from 08-09 to 17-18, to a high of Windsor, which is the light green number that you see there, that has grown at a 6.5% increase from 2008-9 to 2017-18, and all the other points in between.
Gordon, can I ask a question? You might have addressed this and I missed it. These numbers include the charter schools?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you for asking that. Yes, this does include charter schools as well as early childhood. This chart represents, I should back up and say that the first one, the head count, is, if you reference Appendix A in the back of the deck, you'll see the actual numbers that are associated with this, as is the case with the funded pupil count, or FPC. So again, similar trends that you'll see, which would be expected, that the head count trend is very similar to the funded pupil trend across the region. This is just something that I came across in preparing this presentation that struck me as unique or interesting, I guess. These are homeschooled students in each of the districts. And where we saw consistency in the prior two graphs, prior two charts, this one shows a great deal of variability between the districts. And I wish I could give exact reasons for a huge drop or a huge increase, as you see in several districts, including Thompson, from the 2010-11 period to the 11-12 period, a significant drop in homeschooled students, and then an increase over the next 2 years, and then a bit of a leveling off over the last 4 or 5 years. St. Vrain, same way. 0 in 9-10, which may be a reporting issue, how they reported that data, to a rapid increase in the next year in 10-11, and a spike in 13-14, and then a significant drop after that. So I apologize for not having specific data that I can point to and say this is the reason for these fluctuations, but it does show the volatility of that homeschooled population over the last 9 or 10 years. This is a bar chart representing students choicing out of Thompson School District. So Colorado being a choice state, parents have that ability to choice their students in and out of districts from where their residence is. So this would be parents that live within the Thompson School District boundaries, or students, I should clarify, students living in the Thompson School District attendance boundaries that are choicing out to other schools. And you can see by the color of the bars there which district they represent, which district they're choicing out to. So the light blue at the bottom of that chart represents the students that are choicing out to Pooter. So you can see that gradual increase from the beginning year through approximately 13-14 school year, and then a decrease in that number fairly significantly over the last 4 years, from 14-15 to 17-18, meaning that there are fewer students in Thompson School District that are choicing out to Pooter School District. Conversely, the darker blue color right above that is to charter school the Charter School Institute. So there are more students within Thompson boundaries that are enrolling in the Charter School Institute charter schools across the state. So in the district, we know we have 2 charter schools. There's 2 methods that of I don't want to say certification, but arrangement for charter schools. They can be part of the district, which the 2 charter schools in Thompson School District are, or they can be a part of the Charter School Institute, which is really like a separate school district, the Charter School Institute is. So there's 178 school districts in the state. The Charter School Institute is not one of those 178, but it acts as if it is a separate school district. Then you can see in the light green, students choicing out to St. Vrain. The darker red color are all other districts, so there could be 1 or 2 students choicing out to a variety of districts. This is all the other districts combined, the choice out. And then the number of students that are choicing out to Windsor, which has come down from a high in 2015-16, has come down steadily over the last 2 years as well, the number of students choicing out to Windsor. Conversely,
Comment?
I'm sorry.
It looks like we've got a little bit of celebration here. We've got 175 fewer students, if I'm interpreting this right, choicing out than what we did 2 years ago. I mean, that's a good number, and that's well over $1 million and probably about 1.4, 1.2, somewhere in there. So, congratulations to the staff. We've got more people staying in the district than what we have in the past.
That's absolutely correct. From the 2015-16 school year, there are fewer students choicing out, which is a very good thing for the Thompson School District. We're keeping our own at home and being able to provide services for those students. With that comes the state funding, the PPR funding that comes with that. I'm not aware of any surveying that's done or of parents for decisions regarding fewer people choicing out. I would like to say it's because of the quality programs that are offered in Thompson School District, and as Mr. Swanty referred to, the outstanding job that's done by staff in educating those students that is well respected in the community and is letting people feel better about making that decision to say, yes, my child goes to Thompson School District.
And I think the opening of High Plains probably helped to, grab some of those kids back, because we opened in 16, right? So I'm sure that was, a piece of that as well. We were able to serve those kids out east, which was awesome.
So that's the choice out population. Conversely, so again, noticing that trend over the last 3 years, fewer students choicing out. When you switch to the students choicing in, which means students living, their parents reside outside of the Thompson School District boundaries, and they are making the decision to choice their students into Thompson School District. Over that same 3-year period, 2015-16 to 2017-18, we see more students choicing into the district than we have in the past. So the net result of both of those, fewer students choicing out, more students choicing in, is certainly a positive for the district over the last 3 years. So again, you can see on this graph the larger population of students that choice into TSD come from the Johnstown School District, with the next largest and even more impressive, the increasing number. Not only are we seeing fewer students choicing out to Pooter, we are seeing a fairly significant increase of students that live in the Pooter School District boundaries that are choicing into Thompson School District, which is reflected in the light blue section of the bar. And then the other districts that are represented as well. This slide shows the distribution of the Thompson School District student counts. So the largest portion in the blue bar, the light blue bar, is the traditional schools, traditional pre-K through 12. I say traditional schools, meaning non-charter schools. And you can see early childhood is separate from that. So the blue bar itself represents K through 12. The next bar, the lighter red color, represents the early childhood portion of Thompson School District, the student count. The purple represents the student population of Loveland Classical Schools, and the maroon at the top, the population of New Vision Charter. You will notice, if you will, to the left of the graph, 2008-9, 2009-10, and 10-11 do not have Loveland Classical because it opened in 2011. That was the first year that they had students. This is a look at the preliminary 18-19 figures. Discussions are still ongoing with staff, but we're getting very close to arriving at a number that we feel comfortable with to say that, yes, we think this is the projected enrollment that we will have in Thompson School District. So I show you the October count from 16-17, the October count from 17-18, that weekly report that is from not this past Monday, but the Monday before when this presentation was put together, so February 12th, just recently, and then the preliminary budget figures for 18-19. Again, Dr. Crespo, Dr. Siebers, myself, and Skip Armatosky have met preliminarily. We're meeting again this week to make sure that we're comfortable with this, but we're seeing at this point, we are projecting a slight decrease from the October count from 16,278 to 16,268, but it's important to note the differences there between what is TSD traditional versus what is charter schools. So at this point, we're seeing a projected lower number in the charter schools, primarily based on the change that you can see there from 863 for Loveland Classical to 812. So the 863 was as of the October count, and their enrollment has decreased to 812 at this point. That's not uncommon. The traditional K through 12 for Thompson School District, that's the pattern that we see as well, where the October count is always higher. It tends to decrease over the course of the year, and then when the next enrollment period happens, that number increases again. It's a bit of a, it's certainly not a guess because there is science behind the analysis that's done here, but there is some estimating that has to take place. With the number of certificates of occupancy that were issued last year, which, if memory serves me correct, is in the neighborhood of 600, that should yield an increase in the student count. We did not see that increase in the 16-17 year, 17-18, or I'm sorry, we haven't seen that in the 17-18 year. Some anecdotal evidence or conversations that I've had with other districts, Windsor having the highest growth in the area, highest percentage growth in the area at 6.5% annualized rate, has been that they had seen growth in 1 year in housing, and the growth in the student count didn't take place until the subsequent year, the next year after that. So that could be a possibility. From a budgeting perspective, my philosophy, I think a conservative philosophy, is to not plan on that until a phrase that we use, until we see the whites of the eyes. That's always a positive sign when we have more students enrolled than what we anticipate in the budget. And then that, from the student membership count with the head count, which was on the prior page, to this, which is the funded pupil count, again, following that same trend. It's slightly less than what the head count is, but that's due to funding kindergarten at 50% or half day.
Quick question. Do you get the charter school numbers from the charter school folks? They estimate those, or
They
are we
do.
estimating?
Each charter school is responsible for preparing their own budget. These numbers, I will say, have not been vetted with the charter schools at this point, but it's done with, they're part of the update that takes place on the weekly. We know what their October count was. We know what their current count is. So these are estimates from the district's perspective, from admin's perspective, on what we think those enrollments could be. Those could fluctuate based on their final budget. that they submit, but we would have conversations to say, what's the rationale? If they come back with numbers drastically different than these, it would certainly require explanation for why they are saying that, why they think those numbers would be what they are. And we would compare that to their October count of this year, to the trend that we've seen. So just as an example, if we go back one slide to the head count, so for the TSD traditional K-12 schools, for the October count this year was 14,373 students. To the current head count, as of February 12th, 14,335 students, a decrease of 38 students, or 0.3%. So 0.3% of the student population decreased. If you look at Loveland Classical, just as an example, 863 students at October count to 812 students on their last weekly enrollment count, a decrease of 51 students, or 5.9% decrease from October count to now, versus the district's traditional decrease of 0.3% decrease from October count to now.
What are your thoughts on that drop in count? That's pretty substantial, dropping 51 at 6 or 7% of their total count.
I'd be remiss if I tried to offer, certainly I have some thoughts in my mind, but I would like to just have that discussion, have the opportunity to discuss that with the Loveland Classical staff before I would offer any concrete opinions on what that might be. It could be a variety of reasons as well. It could be a larger population that moved out of the district. It could be, I'm hesitant to say, a variety of things that it could be without giving them the ability to offer explanation for those numbers as well.
But it didn't translate into students in the traditional. I mean,
Do we track them? Do they come back to?
well,
Thompson
we
traditional?
didn't jump 50 kids. They dropped 50 kids,
Yeah,
but our
we
numbers.
can't tell that.
It could have.
Well,
They could be
easily.
netted in that number. So their
'Cause we're gonna
drop
lose
could
some.
have gone from the charter school
Well,
into
true,
the
because
traditional
we don't know where our
schools.
other kids lost.
And we
Right,
just had a
that's true.
higher
Right.
number, just like the choice in and out
Yeah.
numbers work in
Yeah, we don't
conjunction
have
with each other.
that detail.
These changes in population and student population could be a netted number as well.
So do we track that if they come back into Thompson traditional schools?
You would know that, right?
We have the ability to look
Ability at
in the
least?
planning department, student by student. It is labor intensive to look at each one of those individual
so.
students, but we do have that ability. So typically we do spot checking. We'll take a random sample of those 51. We'll take 10 of those 51 and say, did they transfer out of state into another district in the state, or did they come into the traditional TSD K through 12?
And do we consider, so traditional includes everything from SOARs to, that's all rolled into traditional, right?
Correct, all
Okay,
Thompson
great.
Online, SOARs,
Okay.
Ascent,
Ferguson?
all those programs are included in this count, yes.
That October count number, that's the hard number that they get funding for their students that we pass on. So even if they drop 50 kids, they're still going to get,
That funding and
they
we
still
don't?
get the funding for.
That is exactly correct. Just as it would be with choice in or out students. If a student is in any of these, in the Thompson Traditional or a charter school, as of October 2nd, whatever the count date was for the 2017, that's the date the funding is determined. If the student transfers on October 5th, 3 days after that, the funding stays with the school that student was in when the count was done. Same thing if a student moves into the district after the October count date, we do not get any funding for that student. We get the student count for the next year. Conversely, if we have a student that choiced out or moved out of the state, out of the district, and they were in the district as of the October count date, TSD would get credit for that revenue. One thing I'll point out in the appendix, and I know I apologize to the vast viewing audience at home, the smallness of this information, but it is posted on board docs that you can go and look at. But on Appendix B, there's a little more information that I didn't have a slide on. This shows you the homeschooled population at the top. It also shows percentage of population for our neighboring districts and TSD from a free and reduced lunch eligibility standpoint, and a special education as a percent of total membership standpoint, if anybody is interested in those percentages. I will point out under the special education percentage, Thompson is at 12.6% in 17-18. The national average of a student population that is associated with special ed is about 12.2%. So Thompson has a bit higher number or percentage of our population that is identified as special ed. You can see the other districts in the area that it's a lower percentage, and that's typical for the state of Colorado. At a meeting I was at Friday with statewide people, that number is more in the approximately 9% range. So that is a credit to, if Charlie is still here, a credit to the special care, special programs, the performance of the special education program within Thompson School District.
It's stunning, and I know we've said it before when Charlie presented at last meeting, but to be 4.2% higher in special ed enrollment than Poudre School District, that's massive, and it speaks volumes to our staff. And it's also a very large cost because we don't get reimbursed, appropriately. So from the state or the feds. So it's a
many
tough
times
cost.
there's further costs that are associated with serving extensive need population. Yes.
This is great. It's Gordon for this tiny little chart.
It's easier to read on your computer screen enlarged, perhaps. So any questions I could answer for the board based on this step in the budget building process, which is setting what that enrollment number is. This is an important part of the process because this is the number that's multiplied by the per pupil revenue or PPR number that we'll have to make some estimates on as well, because that won't be set finally until the state budget is adopted, typically in the May timeframe. So there'll be some rational, reasonable assumptions that are made in a PPR number, and my plan right now is to have at least 3, if not 4 versions of what that revenue would look like based on different assumptions that have been talked about at this point.
All right, any further questions for Gordon? Dave?
Yeah, Gordon, we had communicated during the week about something we discussed at the last regular meeting. And board, as you remember, we asked for every board update include not just next year, but the next 3 years, we decided. I know you communicated to me you thought that was going to start in April. I'm of the opinion we need it as soon as possible, but certainly not before you could prepare it. So let's just discuss that. I believe it's very valuable to the public that we understand as soon as possible what the impacts of us having to reduce our budget to balance our budget, and the potential for increase in growth and the expenses that could come with that if we don't have schools to put them in, more busing, et cetera. So why don't you respond, Gordon, what you think you could do in response to our request?
Sure, and I would say with that increased enrollment comes increased revenue as well from the state perspective. So the budgeting process is a very progressive process that's undertaken. How many students do we expect, which this update provides? What PPR do we expect? What other revenue sources do we expect? What staffing do we expect based on to employ based on the student counts that we have? What inflationary factor, what non-FTE costs do we expect? What is our insurance enrollment or renewal going to look like? A lot of progressive factors that take place in the budgeting process. So the calendar that was presented to the board at the last meeting from a budget perspective, I believe calls for a draft budget to be in front of the board April 14th or 18th, whatever that meeting date is. I can't recall exactly what that is. I would be hesitant to say that I would have any confidence in providing 3-year numbers until we have an idea what 18-19 is truly going to look like. And that certainly 18-19 will involve some assumptions as well. So staying true to the budgeting process, I think that is a reasonable time frame from my perspective to have a 3-year plan. The first look at a 3-year plan would be when the draft budget for 18-19 is presented, which would be that mid-April meeting, whenever that may be. And that will have several assumptions. There'll be different versions of that too, based on, do we expect growth to not be 0.6% or 0.7%, but to be 1.2%? Do we expect the PPR number to increase? Do we expect rate of inflation and growth rate to be approximately 5% or 3% or 7%? Because that will help dictate the revenue number that we have. Do we expect, if we have that growth, exactly what you said, does that require modulars at some areas to be able to accommodate that growth? Does that include any of the school closure discussions that have been had? Does it include what transportation looks like? All those variables. So again, I think the calendar that was laid out previously is a reasonable timeline for providing that 3-year look. And this is not my budget. This is not any one person's budget. This is the district's budget. It requires input from a lot of people. There's input from every department. And having those discussions with those individual stakeholders is important, with those assumptions for what a 3-year plan looks like, to be able to come to that conclusion. So while I would agree sooner rather than later is better, I would, if that were the case, I would say I would have 90% comfort in my numbers that are presented to you, not my numbers again, the district's numbers, in what is presented at the final budget at the end of May, or I can have 75% accuracy with the assumptions that are made in mid-April at that meeting. The further we back up or move forward in that, having those projections, the less reliability I think there are in those numbers.
How does the board feel about that?
Just from past experience, I know that the governor's budget does this and that and the other, and until we have some kind of direction from what that's going to look like, I don't really see the point in putting that uncertainty out for 2 more years on top of this year. I think April, if you have some level of confidence that what you're getting from the legislature numbers in April, then I think going forward from that makes sense.
And am I also hearing you say you need to wait for all the departments to report back to you internally as well?
And that process has
That's
been going on
starting.
since the end of December and really kicked in January. We have budget templates that go out to the individual budget managers. Those conversations are taking place, have taken place. Now it'll be a matter of looking at the asks that are in there, first putting in all the information that's been provided, see what that looks like from a revenue. Again, assumptions are going to have to be made prior to having finalization from the state of what the revenue number looks like. We'll have to make some assumptions there, but we'll drop in those figures and then see what the asks are, what the priorities are. Again, with the focus always being, what can we do that's best for the students of Thompson School District? We want to do no harm. I mean, from a budgeting perspective, we don't want to do any harm. So does that mean, certainly there's priorities that have to be prioritized, but the guiding principle that we have is, what can we do with the least amount of impact in a negative way that still benefits the students and the staff of Thompson School District?
That's fine, if everybody's comfortable waiting till that time. Wendy, could I ask you to put that in the minutes, please? Not, just because it should go in the minutes, that we'll have a 3-year projection come May. May I suggest that when you do, just pick what you think is the best estimate of all your assumptions. Just give us one. To give us ranges, it's going to be all over the place. Just give us one assumption on every line item that needs an assumption. Just make it let us know what it is, and it's based on that, and your best guess.
I think that's accurate, and I would appreciate that, I don't want to say latitude, but I would appreciate that direction,
Yeah,
because
just-
that, I'd rather not have staff and myself prepare 8 different versions of the budget. But we can still make assumptions and list what those assumptions are. We assume that student count is going to be this.
Right.
We assume that the PPR number from the state is going to be this.
As
based
compared to
on-
inflation, yeah.
Yeah, based on these assumptions, and all those assumptions can be laid out, so hopefully it's very clear to the board and the community what assumptions have been made in arriving at that budget.
Very, very good.
Well, Gordon, what was the funded pupil count that we budgeted for, what year are we in? 17, 18?
17, 18 is not reflected here. I have actual student counts, but I can tell you that we anticipated, again, with the certificates of occupancy that were being issued, that we would have a higher student count than what we did have with the October count. So it was reduced. I'm trying to think from an overall, including all charter schools and the pre-K, I want to say it was 150 students less than what the
What we
budget
budgeted
projected.
for.
Yes.
And then what's the rationale for, I mean, we know we started out with, I'm just going to use the funded pupil count totals. We know we started out at October count 278, and now we're down to 16,278, right? And now we're down to 16,215. What's the rationale for, do we always do that and then go back up? Is there a typical December or whatever, January, February dip?
For Thompson School District, that
For us, okay.
is typically the case. Historically, we have seen October count be set, be determined,
Right.
and then that, over the course of the school year, decreases, and then back up
Back up when school starts.
for the next October count and
All
the
right.
enrollment. I would imagine that we see one transition there between December and January. If families are moving out of district or out of state, they may wait until semester to move. Others move anytime during the semester. I don't know what data we may have, what scientific data we may have. Again, we track with a survey, and Dr. Crespo will correct me if I'm wrong here, in the student information system that we use, that we track it, from a survey standpoint. If they leave, we try to note if they are moving out of district, out of state. We know where everybody goes, because typically they want their records to travel with that student to the new district or the new state that they're going to. So we try to keep track of all of that information within Infinite Campus, which is the student data tracking system that's utilized.
So
But
that-
other districts could be different. Other districts could see a net increase from October
Because
count.
of where they-
And some of it has to do with philosophy of budgeting. If they are very, very conservative in their student count that's budgeted, and then they see enrollment higher than that over the course of the year. There are districts, as Dr. Scheer can attest to, like Littleton, that are net importers of students. So you've seen our choice in and out numbers. So Thompson School District net is a net exporter of students. There's a lot of districts, especially in the metro areas, where the districts are much closer, within, miles of each other, rather than a 15-mile drive. It's a 2-mile drive to get from one district to another. You see a lot of those districts be net importers of students. So that could have some impact on the counts as well.
So the 16,268 FPC for the preliminary budget, that's the number you're going to use going forward, or is that going to be adjusted more yet?
We will have a final determination
Okay.
amongst staff when we have a meeting later this week that's already scheduled to lock in that number.
So we could see a different number yet, one more time, maybe.
We could, although I would feel fairly comfortable with that number at this point. Again, I think that's a conservative number. This is anticipating that we don't see any growth from 600 new certificates of occupancy that have been issued. Again, after missing our student count number from budget to actual this year, it's much easier to go from a lower student count number to a higher one and have more revenue to deal with than it is the other way around.
Any further questions, board? Anybody else? Okay, thank you. And finally, we have item 7.6, which is a brief negotiations update. Dr. Siebers.
Madam President, School Board, Dr. Scherer, Bill Siebers, Chief Human Resources Officer for this amazing district. I have handouts for you that you can work off of.
Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, great. I was just going to look this up. Okay.
So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to come to the work session last Thursday to talk about negotiations. In that meeting, I presented timelines and I talked about the next steps and things like that. So what you have in front of you is the questions that we had talked about last Thursday. And I'll read them briefly and then get into a discussion. So question number one, how do we help our staff prioritize their limited time to flexibly meet the needs of our students? Question two, what changes need to be made in the Memorandum of Understanding to better serve our district? And question three, how do we maintain the current movement of focusing on district salaries and benefits? So the next slide is a discussion for the board, and that revolves around two questions. Do the questions represent what you truly value as a school board? And then the second part is, if not, what is it missing? And when you get into that question of not what is it missing, it meaning what's the value statement that the board wants to move forward. So I'll keep it short to that point and move it to discussion for the board. Do the questions represent what you truly value as a school board?
I have just a little, I don't know if it's a clarification or input around question number 2, which is what changes need to be made in the Memorandum of Understanding to better serve our district? And, you know, I realize these are broad questions, but as I was thinking about these, one of the things that I think, and I think I've heard other board members kind of weigh in on this same thing. I think I heard it when we were at our study session, but maybe streamlining or compressing maybe isn't the word. Maybe streamlining is a better word. The negotiations process, and I would have an interest in seeing if we could possibly do a multi-year negotiations process. So like if we negotiate everything except for salaries on a 2-year basis, if we could do that. So that's a little bit more specific than that broad
No, and that fits in
question.
because that would be the interest of the board. You know, for example, talking to administrators and working through the negotiation process, with question 2, there's some things that we would discuss around, you know, dates in there, you know, as far as previous dates to current dates, addendum F, online support, things like that would fall into that question. So it's a good point about the interest part.
Anybody else have any discussion or input? Dave?
I would just like to repeat the discussion we had last Thursday, and I'd like to be recorded in the minutes. I asked the question last time, does staff come with any recommendations, what has to be changed in the contract? And I believe your response was that you feel, staff feels there's flexibility within all the contract language, that if something needs to be changed, it could be worked out in a cooperative fashion. Am I correct with that?
Correct.
Okay, could I go in the minutes, please? That's important to me. That was number 1, and I didn't understand number 3.
Question, you mean? You
Yeah,
didn't
the
understand the question?
I mean, I understand it, but I just what is it supposed to really mean?
Okay, so you think of the work that we did with recruit and retain and the things moving forward as far as the tuition reimbursement for licensed staff. That just continuing that movement, you know, as far as compensation. So what would compensation look like going into negotiations this year? You know, the work that Gordon's doing right now with the budget, presenting it to the board about where we're at financially, how does that play a role in it? every year in negotiations, basically, it really revolves around three things. It revolves around time, working conditions, and compensation. So compensation is where that third question would be.
So I want to discuss this amongst the board for a second. I have two competing views in my own head. One is that we should take every opportunity to increase pay across the board because we're underpaid as compared to our neighboring districts, and we'll only be as good as our faculty is. So that says, let's support our teachers everywhere we can. Number two, there's unknown out there. And I don't want to have the idea that we're giving them a good raise this year, and then Gordon comes back in May and says, guess what? We fall off the cliff in the school year 2019, 2020, and one of the options is to freeze pay or something like that. So between those two conflicts, I'm not too sure what direction I want to give. I just would like to hear what everybody else has to say about that.
Mark?
I'm glad you brought this up because this was a question that I had about question number 3 as well. And this is kind of, as a new board member, a question for the existing board members who were here last year in the
No, I asked you. No, you ain't doing that. No.
So I would turn the question around and can you describe what the current movement of focusing on district salaries in particular was? What is that movement? What does that look like? What direction are we headed? Have we kind of set a course from last year?
I would think the board has several times said that the board could serve no better service to the district and the community than attract and retain the best teachers available. And obviously, if we have a pay scale lower than our adjoining districts, that's defeating that point. So direct answer to your question is, we would love to give teachers as much a raise as we can afford so that we could attract and retain the best available. Is that fair, board? Am I speaking well for everybody?
Reality hits.
Yeah, then reality hits, and
So.
reality is going to hit in
Right.
in a year.
I think stating it that way, as Bill mentioned, it brings into play that, we have the tuition reimbursement and the other things that we talked about that we've put into play. And so I think, the question then becomes, is there more of that? Is there the same amount of that? Is there less of that? Is it become a strictly compensation issue? What are the trade-offs there? What are the moving parts, I guess, in that?
So the question I would have for the board is, years ago, we had passed Proposition 104, and 104 basically states that negotiations will take place publicly. So the question around that is, I definitely want to understand what you're talking about as far as increasing pay. So what does that look like? What do you have in mind? Because the thing I want to do is when we go to negotiations, we represent the interests of the board and making sure that we're on the same page as far as what we represent when we start having these discussions with the association. So in the past.
If I could add one more thought. We have, as a district, delayed maintenance. We now have a maintenance backlog. We have not installed new curriculum because of the cost, et cetera. So all this has to be balanced with the desire of the board to increase pay. This is where I come back and say, what is your suggestion? Sure, we could give you a number, we could tell you something, but I feel it's up for you, the staff, to actually tell us, with all the competing interests, increasing teacher pay and all staff pay, all the curriculum activities we're delaying, the deferred maintenance, what is staff's recommendation to the board? This is our preferred spending plan?
I'd say, spending 11 years on negotiations, and this is the 4th year facilitating it, I'd say honoring steps and columns moving forward is probably the number one priority going in, is to honor the steps and columns.
See, that's the priority for negotiation, but that's not, I don't know if that's the priority for the district. That's my question.
Yeah, and I'd say that's up to the 7 of you to decide what your value statement is around that. Because the thing I would say is you keep saying increasing pay, recruit and retain. So I totally understand that. I'm taking an isolated item right now and saying going in negotiations, steps and columns would be a part of, if you want to continue that movement and not taking steps forward and keeping up with other districts as far as recruiting and retaining our employees, steps and columns would be something that would be on the forefront.
So I was just going to question you back then and say that specifically right now, would you like to hear us say we value honoring steps and columns?
I'd like to hear that.
I'd like to see the comprehensive plan from staff on where we should be spending our money. They're the professional educators. I don't think we should be suggesting it to them before they suggest to us. That's how I feel.
Okay, Dr. Scheer?
Just real quick, I think this backs up why Mr. Jones brought up what he did about the planning around budget. The last thing in the thing I want to do in the world is feed you phantom numbers.
Right.
I won't have real numbers for a while. Gordon Jones won't have real numbers for a while. Staff are working. They are working on that right now. As soon as these numbers begin to get a little bit more firmed up, because this is not just a spending plan. This is also anticipating what the revenue plan is going to look like. And that's an important part of this. As I've said to you before, budgeting is real simple. It's revenue versus expense. It's that easy. It's that hard in terms of what can you afford to do. And to make a statement regarding what we can do, I want to make sure that the numbers we feed to you are real numbers, not phantom numbers. So as we work through this, and as we work through the 3-year planning, which we'll do, we'll become more and more sensitive to what we think that is. And we're always just looking at those two things: how much revenue, how much expense, and trying as much as we can to balance all that against all of the asks that are out there and deciding where those priorities should be. And we will come to you with recommendations regarding those things. So I think it all kind of fits into this whole conversation we've been having around budget tonight, and certainly your questions are good questions. I can guarantee you we can move to that in terms of the realities. I think tonight, though, the question that's being asked is, not holding you to anything in terms of the real impact of cost. What do you value? What is your value around these issues? And that's kind of where we are at this point.
I'm just going to follow up. I think we've got to understand that these numbers are going to be fluid, but at any given time, based on what we do know, I think it needs to be a back and forth. I don't think we should put it all on you guys saying, come up with something, and I don't think we should dictate to them, but it's a constant back and forth. So I think you hearing what we value at this point in time, knowing it could change, I mean, I don't know how that could not help you. And I do think that is the role of the board, to let our values be known.
Yeah.
And I, just personally, as one member of the board, I do want us to invest in our teachers, because I think that is absolutely priority number one, is investing in our teachers, because that means we're investing in our students. So I'm 100% in support of moving forward with steps and columns this year. And then as the numbers become a little more solid, as we move on, looking at the COLA, the cost of living increase, and getting what that would look like from the state, what is the cost of living increase typically across the state for this year. So that to me, the first step is steps and columns, and then second step is COLA. But
So the thing I can point out really quick and make sure Andy hears this from me, if he's still in the audience, I don't see us going to negotiations and starting on question 3 and TAing, steps and columns. So the reason why I
TA
point,
means tentative agreement.
a tentative agreement.
There's new
Right,
board
just because,
members.
there's other things in play too, as far as what that looks like. But this helps extremely understanding the values you have and the interest behind it. So it's kind of a tag team here. What's your value and what's your interest behind that?
I guess I'm in a similar place that steps and columns is very valued. Before going beyond that, if we're in a position to have something beyond that, that's where I really start looking at that class sizes. I think keeping class sizes low at that point might be, to me, more valuable than adding on to steps and columns, as well as I don't know if we're going to be looking at losing, whatever that might be. I want people to keep their job. I think that's more important to me than adding on to steps and columns.
I think that's a great point, because the other thing I would point out is to recruit and retain employees, it's not so much about the salary, it's other things like working conditions, workload, feeling valued, being respected, training programs. So there's a lot of other things than just the salary number.
Anybody else? So do we feel like do you feel like you've heard our values around those three questions?
Yes. So I'd like to recap. So we're moving forward. February 26th, we have a 2+2, and we'll finalize critical questions from our side and then the critical questions from the association. So from there, we'll move into negotiations on February 28th and start the conversations at 8 to 4 o'clock here in the boardroom. But what I'm hearing the board say is you feel comfortable moving the three questions that are presented in front of you. And you've stated that one of your interests is to look at the negotiation process, possibly going to a multi-year, where every year we would still talk about compensation. And the other part is to increase pay, focusing on the attract and retain of employees for the Thompson School District.
You feel like that covers number one as well? Prior, okay.
Yeah, number one has a lot to do with time, as far as
Right.
passing on the calendar, the increase of student contact days. There's a lot of work we have around there.
And is that more specifically what happens, who dictates what happens during the non-contact time with students? That goes into that question as well, correct?
Correct.
So there'll be some give and take as to whether building principals say what goes on the late start Wednesdays, or at higher administration, or teachers control it, or whoever. So that's part of that.
Correct.
Okay.
And the last comment I would like to say is, yes, we're starting at negotiations with the association, but we've been having conversations with meet and confer groups, because we negotiate with classified staff and we negotiate with APT staff. So we've started that since the beginning of the year, and that's a lot to do with how things are going in the district, what are the working conditions, what things can we improve there. So I just want to highlight, it's just not negotiations with the licensed staff. There's two other groups that we negotiate with as well.
And you will have TEA's questions when?
So the 26th we meet to finalize the questions.
Can we see those before the 28th?
Mm-hmm.
That would be great if you just sent us by email what those questions are, so that we have them.
Thank you, Board. I appreciate it.
Thanks. All right, that takes us to the end of the action, or the discussion items, I guess. There's a few written reports. There's the calendar of events. There's the monthly financial reports. There would have been the study session notes. However, I think I messed up on that little pen, my little magic pen recording. Yes. So my little spy pen. So I'm not sure if I thought I recorded it. So I'm going to have Wendy or somebody in Learning Services who knows how to use that little pen better than I do, to see if they can find that on there. And if they can, we'll have some robust notes off there. Otherwise, again, Board, it would be helpful if maybe you gave me, I asked for this last time, but if you gave me like your top 3 takeaways in an email, then I can, yeah, I know, yes. I can't be the only one taking notes, though.
I don't want to repeat that.
If you all got me, send me your top 3 takeaways, that would be swell.
Okay.
And that way, at least I know that we've captured what's the most important thing, one of the most important things to everyone from that night. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of discussion that happened, but that would be great. Wendy, what's our next? Just next regular meeting?
Next one will be
Nothing
on
else on
March
our
7th.
calendar?
March 7th?
Okay, so March 7th is our next regular meeting. No special meetings with superintendent search between
No,
then.
but you are busy
before
on
then.
the 7th, because you're going to Kids Pack in the morning.
Kids Pack in the morning,
and then
here in the
night.
evening.
Mhm.
Okay. Good? All right, thank you. Adjourned.